The city outside is drowning in silence, but inside that glass tower, two figures refuse to surrender. A lone desk lamp fights against the darkness, casting long shadows on walls that have heard more sighs than laughter. James leans forward, his tie loosened, his eyes bloodshot from nights that never seem to end. Across from him sits Emma, his secretary, her fingers trembling over a keyboard, yet steady enough to keep his dream alive. Stacks of unpaid bills surround them like enemies closing in. Coffee cups, empty and cold, mark the hours they've sacrificed. The world has already written them off, but here, in this midnight battlefield, they are still writing back. Every tick of the clock is a reminder that they could fall tomorrow. But neither moves, because in that silence they know, if they stop now, the world wins. And they are not ready to lose. Before those midnight wars, James had already tasted defeat too many times. He wasn't the son of a dynasty, nor the heir of fortune. He was the boy who walked out of college with empty pockets and debts that grew faster than his hope. Every family dinner turned into a courtroom, uncles shaking their heads, cousins smirking, his own father asking, "When will you give this dream up?" But James couldn't. Each rejection was a stone on his back, yet also the spark that lit his chest on fire. He learned to walk through sneers, to smile when doors slammed in his face. Every no only carved his resolve sharper. So when the night came, when the lamp glowed and Emma typed across from him, James wasn't just fighting for a business. He was fighting to silence every voice that had once called him nothing. Emma's story was written in silence. In the same offices where her heels echoed down polished floors, no one cared to remember her name. To most, she was the woman who refilled cups, who typed notes no one read twice, invisible, replaceable, forgotten. But behind that calm face lived a storm no one saw. Nights spent caring for a sick mother. Bills stacked like mountains, dreams she once buried just to survive. It was this quiet pain that gave her loyalty its weight. When James stumbled, when the world mocked him, Emma did not flinch. Maybe it was because she knew what it felt like to be dismissed. Maybe it was because she saw in him the same hunger she carried. Together, two forgotten souls found each other. And in a city built to devour the weak, they became each other's shield against the darkness. The boardrooms were never kind. James would stand at the end of long tables, voice steady, eyes carrying the weight of sleepless nights. He spoke of visions, towers not yet built, companies not yet born. But when his words ended, the only sound was laughter, sharp, cruel, echoing off glass walls. "So you're chasing ghosts," one investor sneered. Another smirked, "Come back when you've grown up." James forced a smile, but inside each word was a knife. Beside him, Emma scribbled notes no one would ever read, her silence hiding how deeply those jeers cut her too. She felt every insult as if they were aimed at her, because in truth they were. Yet when the doors closed, when the echoes faded, she would catch his eye, steady, unshaken. Without a word, she reminded him, he was not fighting this war alone. And that made all the difference. Some nights hunger sat with them like a third guest, a single sandwich split in two, its taste bitter with sacrifice. James always slid the larger half toward Emma, hiding the gnawing in his stomach. She noticed but said nothing. Her silence was its own act of loyalty. When the office heater broke in winter, their breath clouded in the frozen air. Wrapped in coats, fingers stiff with cold, they still typed, still planned, still believed. The room looked like a battlefield. Papers scattered, coffee gone cold, their bodies worn thin. Calls rarely brought hope. Most ended in rejection, some in cruel laughter. But in the stillness after, as the clock ticked past midnight, they would glance at each other. No words needed. That look was their oath. No matter how empty the nights, they would not surrender. Together they would outlast the storm. It happened on an ordinary night, in a cafe buzzing with soft chatter and clinking cups. James sat frozen at a corner table, his hands tightening around a cracked mug, as familiar words spilled from another man's mouth. Their friend, someone he had once trusted, was pitching his idea to investors as if it had always been his own. Every detail, every dream James had fought for in sleepless nights, stolen in plain sight. Rage rose in his chest like fire. His vision blurred. His body leaned forward, ready to confront, to break. Years of humiliation, hunger, and sacrifice seemed to mock him in that single moment. Then Emma's hand touched his arm. just a whisper steady as stone. They can steal your idea, not your fire. Her words cut through the storm. Betrayal still burned, but now it became fuel. That night, James didn't crumble. He walked out with Emma at his side, carrying not the ashes of defeat, but the spark of an empire waiting to be built. The night was quiet, the kind of silence that presses against the walls. James sat hunched over a desk, littered with receipts and unpaid bills, a pencil shaking in his hand. On a torn sheet of paper, he began to draw lines, circles, fragments of an idea that only he could see. Each stroke was both fragile and defiant, the first blueprint of a dream too big for the world to believe. Across from him, Emma's fingers danced over the typewriter, capturing his chaos and giving it form. She organized, structured, built order, where he only saw vision. When his head dropped into his palms, drowning in doubt, she would tap the desk gently. Deadline. Not to scold, but to remind him his dream was real enough to finish. Hours blurred into dawn. By then, the paper was no longer just scribbles, and Emma, no longer just a secretary. She had become his hidden strategist, the silent architect standing beside the architect. Together they were building more than a plan. They were building destiny. The first yes came quietly, almost unremarkably. A small investor, persuaded by fragments of James's blueprint and Emma's meticulous notes, agreed to back them. They walked into their first office, a windowless basement with cracked tiles and flickering fluorescent lights. The air smelled of damp concrete, yet the check in their hands felt heavier than gold. Every victory came with a cost. Emma emptied her savings, selling the few pieces of jewelry she had left just to keep the tiny team afloat. James skipped meals, letting hunger gnaw at him while funneling every penny into outdated computers and second-hand equipment. The weight of sacrifice pressed on them, but they carried it willingly, each discomfort a testament to their belief. Even in that dim basement, hope began to flicker. A printer whirred, a light bulb hummed, and for the first time in months the empty walls didn't feel like prison. They felt like a launch pad. Together in hunger and fatigue, they were learning that every small victory, no matter how humble, was a step towards something far greater. The launch was nothing spectacular, just a modest product, displayed on a makeshift table in a rented hall. No flashing lights, no fanfare, just James pacing nervously while Emma adjusted the last brochures. Weeks of sleepless nights, skipped meals, and endless planning had come down to this quiet moment. Then the unexpected happened. A journalist approached, notebook in hand, curiosity in their eyes. They watched the duo, tired yet unwavering, and later wrote a piece that captured the heart of their struggle. The sleepless duo chasing an impossible dream. For the first time, James and Emma saw their names in print. The words leapt off the page like a promise, proof that the world had noticed them. James felt a thrill he had never known, a taste of victory so pure it made the fatigue of years dissolve for a heartbeat. Emma smiled, quiet and proud, knowing this recognition wasn't just for James. It was for both of them. In that moment, hope wasn't just flickering anymore. It was blazing. Their journey had finally reached the light. Just as their momentum peaked, betrayal struck. A trusted partner pulled out funding at the last second, leaving unpaid bills stacked like warning towers, and debts multiplying in real time. James froze, staring at the empty bank notifications, his chest tightening with disbelief and rage. Then it erupted. Fists slammed into the office wall, sending papers fluttering to the floor, blueprints teetering on the edge of the desk. The office felt smaller, the air thick with frustration and exhaustion. Emma's hands shook as she clutched the contracts, but she stood firm. Her voice, quiet yet resolute, cut through the storm. "We've come too far to stop here." In that moment, the betrayal became fuel. The knife in their back didn't end them. It lit a fire. Together, in that dim office of scattered papers and broken promises, they vowed this was not defeat. It was the spark of a comeback. The office was drowning in papers, bills stacked higher than the desks themselves, threatening to topple at the slightest touch. The air was thick with exhaustion, the faint hum of the heater struggling to keep the room warm. Emma sank into a chair, head in her hands, feeling the weight of months of sacrifice crushing her spirit. She had nearly given up, nearly walked out and left it all behind. But then she looked at James. His eyes were red, rimmed with fatigue, yet burning with the same stubborn fire she had come to trust. In that moment, she realized their fight wasn't just about money or deadlines. It was about proving to the world and to themselves that they could endure. They argued, voices sharp with frustration. Tears fell. Unspoken grief poured into the silence between them. For a while they just sat, broken and weary, listening to the ticking clock. And then, as midnight struck, something shifted. Wordlessly, both returned to their desks. Pens in hand, keyboards clicking, minds racing. Even at their breaking point, they refused to surrender. Together, they would keep building, keep fighting, because some dreams demanded everything they had. The air in the boardroom was electric, thick with anticipation. Months of relentless nights, skipped meals, and endless spreadsheets had led to this moment. James stood at the head of the table, his suit slightly wrinkled, tie loosened from hours of preparation. His eyes, bloodshot yet determined, scanned the room full of skeptical executives. He began to speak, voice steady but charged with every ounce of passion he had stored over years of struggle. Charts and projections flashed across the screen, but it wasn't just his words that carried weight. Emma, sitting beside him with quiet focus, had meticulously organized every detail. Numbers aligned, scenarios calculated, risks minimized. Her fingers traced the slides, ensuring nothing was overlooked. When the room questioned, it was Emma who provided clarity, her calm precision backing every claim James made. As the final slide faded, the room fell silent. Then came the nods, the murmurs of approval, and finally the handshake that would change everything. Together they signed the contract, the ink on the paper symbolizing more than a business deal. It was the transformation of years of sacrifice into a global opportunity. In that moment, exhaustion and doubt dissolved. The basement office, the midnight hunger, the betrayals, the tears, all led to this single night. James and Emma had not just survived. They had turned struggle into destiny. The empire grew faster than anyone could have imagined. Skyscrapers sprouted where once there had been empty streets. Offices spanned continents, filled with teams executing strategies James and Emma had once sketched on crumpled paper in a dim basement. Magazine covers bore James's name in bold letters, celebrating the visionary who conquered the business world. Yet for all the glitz and recognition, his mind always returned to that tiny office where it all began. He remembered the nights when the heater broke and they huddled in coats over cold desks. He remembered the hunger, the exhaustion, the moments when quitting seemed easier than moving forward. And he remembered Emma, quiet, steadfast, brilliant, who had become far more than a secretary. She had been the backbone, the strategist, the constant presence who carried as much of the dream as he had. At every press conference, every board meeting, every milestone, James never let her slip into the shadows. She didn't stand behind him. She stood beside him. And in the quiet moments away from cameras, he made sure she knew it. The empire wasn't just his, it was theirs. Every skyscraper, every contract, every headline bore the invisible mark of the woman who had refused to let him fall. Together they had built more than a business. They had built a legacy. James's journey is more than a story of wealth and success. It is a testament to the quiet, often invisible hands that shape every empire. For years, the world saw only him, the face in magazines, the name on skyscrapers, the voice in boardrooms. But behind every late-night breakthrough, every strategic pitch, every risk that became reality, there was Emma, the secretary who became the spine of his legacy. She was not an assistant in the shadows. She was a partner in every sense, the unseen force that carried the dream when fatigue and doubt threatened to crush it. Power, James learned, is never built alone. It is stitched together in countless acts of loyalty, courage, and sacrifice by those who never demand recognition. It is the friend who refuses to abandon you when betrayal strikes, the colleague who steadies your hand when fear overwhelms, the silent warrior who believes in your fire even when the world does not. So to everyone watching, look around you. Remember the ones who stayed when the night was darkest, who shared in your struggle without seeking the spotlight. These are the hands that build empires. Subscribe, because stories like this remind us that no dream is ever truly achieved alone.